You know me, I'm Dr. Mark Andrew Colonel Holowchak. I'm a Thomas Jefferson scholar, historian, and philosopher, prolegomενist, and welcome to another episode of The Real Thomas Jefferson. I was recently sent a missive via my Hotmail account by Tony Lewis, and he asked about Thomas Jefferson biography, specifically Dumas Malone's six-volume um, biography of Thomas Jefferson. And Mr. Lewis wanted to know if that was worth reading. He said that he really hasn't read much about Thomas Jefferson. Want to know if that was a good place to start. And my answer to that would be no. Is it because it's such a bad biography? No, it's an exceptional biography. But if you're starting off, I recommend starting off rather simply. So today I'm going to talk just a little bit about some good places to start if you're interested in Thomas Jefferson, learning more about Thomas Jefferson. One book, let's see if I can get this centered in here. I don't know, it's not working, but it is a small booklet by Dumas Malone titled Thomas Jefferson, A Brief Biography, put out by Monticello. Again, I'll try to set this up, and if it's not working, it's not working. There it is, A Brief Biography. And it's sent up by the people at Monticello. It's very short, and because Dumas Malone is just the greatest Thomas Jefferson historian, and it's very, very good. If anybody's going to write a summation of the life of Thomas Jefferson, it's Dumas Malone. Now, I mentioned as well for scholars, Dumas Malone writes a sixth of Thomas Jefferson. It's written over, I think, 4 decades. And if you're a serious Jefferson scholar, that's where you have to go. And I'll get back to that shortly. Another good place to start is Ken Burns' sketch of his documentary on Thomas Jefferson. Now, that needs to be taken cum grano salis, with a grain of salt, simply because he's doing documentaries, and as someone who does documentaries, the aim of the documentary is to be informative, but also to be interesting. So he takes certain liberties and he plays up on the possibility of Jefferson's racism, which I find repulsive in some sense. But nonetheless, it's still a fair introduction. I think if you watch that, you come away with a decently good idea of who Thomas Jefferson was. So the idea is, if you're going to read about Thomas Jefferson for the first time, don't dig into the scholarly books. Get into something like Ken Burns' documentary or Dumas Malone's book here on Thomas Jefferson, A Brief Biography. For scholars, potential scholars, there is a 3-volume work by Henry S. Randall, and this is a great place to start. It's called The Life of Thomas Jefferson. This is the earliest biography of Thomas Jefferson. It's considered by a lot of scholars part of the hagiographical tradition, which means sort of like, the way the interpretation of Thomas Jefferson as a person who's a saint who could do no wrong. I find that objectionable. The fact that early historians wrote histories of people that they much admired, so you don't get, the denigration of the people as well, and that's fine with me. We don't always have to have that. Another place is The Domestic Life of Thomas Jefferson by Sarah Randolph, his granddaughter. And this is a wonderful book. It tells you about Jefferson at home. And then we have, I think, which is a really great book, one that I liked quite a bit is, again, these aren't showing up, is Gilbert Gilbert Chinard. He's a Frenchman who writes a biography of Thomas Jefferson. And this is really written a bit in the hagiographical tradition. But if you want to understand Jefferson as a political theorist, it's really a good way to start. I read the book a few times because I much enjoyed it. And I hate to say this, I think some of the early biographers of Thomas Jefferson give us a better picture of Jefferson than the more recent biographers who are intent on castigating Jefferson, putting him in his place. And I find that, like I said, sort of disgusting. Now, as I said, for scholars, I highly recommend Dumas Malone's 6-volume biography of Thomas Jefferson. Um, if you're going to be a Jeffersonian scholar, you have to read that. That is the first thing I think you need to read. It still bears fruit today. I go back and I look at some of the things that Malone has written, and he has insights that contemporary scholars just still don't have today on numerous issues. He's really done his homework. It took him, like I said, over 4 decades to complete that 6-volume biography. But the man did his digging, did his homework, and it's really quite readable. It stands the test of time quite nicely. He was the Thomas Jefferson Memorial Scholar at the University of Virginia, and the first one, and he was an excellent scholar. The man who replaced him is Merrill D. Peterson, and he writes his book. It's titled Thomas Jefferson in the New Nation, a Biography. This is a very lengthy 1-volume biography of Jefferson, just over 1,000 pages in length. And Merrill D. Peterson is the second great Jeffersonian scholar, and it certainly is must read. I've talked another book that I stumbled upon is that by Nathan Schackner. And I came across this not too long ago, written in 1951. It's a 2-volume biography of Thomas Jefferson. And the insights that Schackner has are incredible, right? So again, Schackner's 2 volumes here are highly recommended. By more contemporary scholars, there's The American Sphinx by Joseph Ellis. Ellis is a bit of a turncoat, arguing early on that Jefferson never could have had an affair with Sally Hemings. You all know the story. And then later on, he jumps on the bandwagon. He said definitely had an affair with her. But his book, American Sphinx, of course, the title gives you a little bit of a hint that he's going to try to be controversial. Jefferson is a Sphinx-like personality, says one thing, does another. A thesis I think is a bit ridiculous, but nonetheless, I think it's not a bad biography. It's not a complete biography. What I mean by that, when should you write a biography of Thomas Jefferson? Let's ask that question. His is not complete. What I mean by that, he doesn't start off from Jefferson's birth to take us through sequentially, right? In a sequentious manner, all the events of Jefferson's life and picking out the ones that he thinks. It's pick and choose with him. I think he has only 5 chapters, and out of those 5 chapters, he tells us what he thinks. He picks out events in Jefferson's life in 5 chapters, and he focuses on those events instead of going into a detailed discussion of Thomas Jefferson. Now, from contemporary writers, there is Noble Cunningham Jr.'s In Pursuit of Reason, The Life of Thomas Jefferson, right? This is Cunningham's book. It's written in super recent, if I remember correctly, by LSU Press. This is 1987. It's well researched and well done as well. And he covers the life of Jefferson in under 400 pages. A more recent is John Bowles' Thomas Jefferson. John Bowles is just Thomas Jefferson. And Bowles titles it Jefferson, Architect of American Liberty. This was put out in what year? This came out not too long ago. Let me find the year here. Can't seem to find it. Anyways, this is by Basic Books, New York. Oh, it's 2017. It's a lengthy biography, um, just under 600 pages, just over 600 pages with this biographical essay, and it's worth reading as well. There are a number of other books on Jefferson, biographies. I've never written a Jefferson biography. Go back to the question, when or why should someone write a Jefferson biography? Well, if you have interest in Thomas Jefferson, yeah, and if you're a fine scholar, you might be interested in writing a biography of Thomas Jefferson. There's nothing wrong with that. Um, I'm old school here, and I think if you're going to write a biography of Thomas Jefferson, you should do so because you have something new to add that others haven't said. You have many new insights that others don't have, and you're going to come from that angle. You're going to add something to the scholarship that hasn't been added before. Another reason for writing a biography, if you're not going to add all that much that's new, and there are many new scholars that do that as well. If you're representing a certain publisher and that publisher asks you to write a biography of Jefferson, so they have, like other publishers, their own biography of Thomas Jefferson in competition with other publishers. And that's understandable sometimes but I'm old school. I think if you're going to show interest in writing a biography of Thomas Jefferson, it's because you found, even in the greatest biographers, something that is wanting, something that needs to be written. That, of course, doesn't stop the calumniators today from writing on Jefferson, the Peter Onufs, the Annette Gordon Reeds, and other people who write denigratively of Thomas Jefferson. But that's a fine place to start. Now, I've never written a biography of Thomas Jefferson. And the reason for that is simple, because there are so many fine biographies. Merrill D. Peterson's, one volume biography, for example, and John Bowles, biography as well. I don't know that I'd have anything interesting to add. My disposition is not, to write historical biographies in the first place. As a philosopher, I've always been predominantly interested in the mind of Thomas Jefferson. He has such a brilliant mind. So he did write, one book. I do have psychoanalytic training that biographers don't have. So I do have a book titled Thomas Jefferson, Psychobiography of an American Lion. And that's an inordinately expensive book. It's a book that I really enjoy a lot, published by Nova. I write a biography of Thomas Jefferson from the psychological point of view. I'll post this at the end of the video of these about which I'm talking. I have another book called The Cavernous Mind of Thomas Jefferson, an American Savant. And I probably should share these with you while I'm doing this. Let me do that and make it. So here we have The Cavernous Mind of Thomas Jefferson. And prior to that, other books that I've written. Rethinking Thomas Jefferson's views on slavery and race is good, because the whole notion of Jefferson was an unquestioned racist, I think, is objectionable because it's a presentist thesis. Jefferson's views on, here is a collection of the scholars Thomas Jefferson vital writings of a vital American. This is an important contribution that I have. I collected essays on Thomas Jefferson more from a philosophical perch. I'm reading about his political philosophy, about his educational views, about his religious and moral thinking, as well as a section titled Collectania, just a sort of ragtag collection of things. And, so if you want to learn about Thomas Jefferson, I say from the start, read Thomas Jefferson first. Maybe start with Malone's brief, short essay, short book, his booklet on Thomas Jefferson. Maybe watch the documentary on Thomas Jefferson, and then read Thomas Jefferson. People find that perhaps a daunting task. I'm going to scoot over here. A lot of the things I talked about, and let me go back earlier. Here is the book, Thomas Jefferson's Psychobiography of American Life. I look at Jefferson from a psychoanalytic perspective here, which is interesting to me because I think he was a neurotic figure. I mean that in a somewhat flattering way. He was a great man. And I think all greatness, in some sense, suffers from neurosis. And Thomas Jefferson was deeply immersed in the world in which he lived. He didn't just live life, he through it. He enjoyed living. Jack McLaughlin said, and I said this before, one of the more interesting insights anybody's ever had on Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson was like a child in a playpen in which there was an abundance of toys. The world was that playpen. And the fact that he studied law, politics, he was an ethician, he studied various religions, he studied sciences of his day, biology, paleontology, horticulture, geology, things like that, climatology, um, and all sorts of things. He just, the architecture, he was an accomplished violinist until he broke his wrist and his right wrist. And yeah, he was so well versed. He was a patron and lover of the arts, of painting and sculpture. And his Monticello front pays a visit, and without getting bombarded from all the Sally Hemings and the racist stuff, you'll see that the Monticello is festooned with all sorts of wonderful works of art there. So I'm interested from the psychological perspective. My thesis is that he's neurotic in some fairly interesting sense, but it's the sort of playful neuroticism doesn't hurt anybody. Moralist, the elusive Thomas Jefferson. Let me see if that. Here is a book that I wrote early on Thomas Jefferson, uncovering his unique philosophy and vision, and I talk about Jefferson's well worth reading. I talk about Jefferson's um, political philosophy, his moral thinking, his and his educational philosophy in here. And that book, once I finished it, I realized I had to write a book on Jefferson's political philosophy. I've written two since then. I had to write a book on Jefferson's educational views, which I did, and I had to write a book about Jefferson as ethician, which I did. And let me see if there's another book I think I can recommend. Can't seem to find it, but I did write a book, and I don't have a copy of it in my pictures here, but it's a book on Thomas Jefferson. The many hats that Jefferson wore, where I talk about 9 different Thomas Jeffersons. He was a tremendously vital. He was perhaps in his day the most important representative of the American Enlightenment Revolution. So you got Jefferson as a farmer, as Jefferson a lawyer, as a politician, as an ethician, as a historiographer, historiographer, as a what else did I talk about? I think I talk about his architecture. He was the foremost, many architectural historians concede the foremost important early American architectural figure. And so I talk about the many different hats that Thomas Jefferson wore. He was interested in language. He was a philologist of some note, studied languages of all sorts, ancient languages, modern languages, Italian, Spanish, English, Latin, Greek, and so forth. So he loved the world in which he lived. So in closing, let me say, for someone who wants to start a Thomas Jefferson, I recommend Dumas Malone's really short essay that published by the people at Monticello on Thomas Jefferson. And it'll give you an idea of who this person really was. And if you want to pursue more, if you want to read more about Thomas Jefferson, and if you do, then open up, then, open yourself up to Malone's 6 volumes, to Peterson's work. And, if you want some of the stuff that I've written, as many of you know, I've written 28 published books on Thomas Jefferson. I'm in the process of writing 2 more, a commentary on Thomas Jefferson's philosophical letters with John Adams. And have another book titled The World Without Thomas Jefferson. And there's another book on which I'm working, and I can't even seem to remember what I'm doing with that. So here, as well as my work on Ukrainian. So anyways, I want to thank those of you who watched the show for your suggestions and comments. As you can see, your suggestions and comments oftentimes wind up being part of another episode here. All right, so that's it for now, TTFN, and we'll do this on another occasion.